All right, well, thanks for coming. We're going to start this session with John and Tony. I think as many of you know, John and Tony just recently had their 50th anniversary of singing together, which they celebrated with a concert here at the BMC. And I just thought it would be fun to take the chance here at the festival, to have a little conversation, to kind of ask them some more probing questions about their
He's
history.
going to ask probing questions?
I don't know.
So, John and Tony, as I'm sure most, if not everybody here knows, have just been like incredibly inspirational and influential for generations of singers at this point. So we're lucky to have them here and to try to glean some...
Mentioned in the New York Times.
in the police log section?
A Robert Shelton review of the Philadelphia Folk Festival in 1973.
We're not at 73 yet, John. Actually, I was going to give the caveat that we're not going to cover all 50 years of John and Tony.
That was the peak.
Well, I never saw that. You
Okay.
kept that from me.
No, you saw it.
All right. Well, this is going to be a long conversation. Anyway, so I thought we could start with you telling the story of the Genesis, the book of Genesis of John and Tony.
In the beginning
Yes.
was the song, and the song was good,
And was sung by the Copper Family.
and was sung by the Copper Family. Yes, they're as old as Genesis.
This really seemed like a good idea at the time. You guys met in Ithaca, New York.
We met as graduate students at Cornell University in the fall of 1968. The Ford Foundation was giving us money, and we both arrived. Tony got there first, I think. I'd arrived in New York City with just enough bus fare to get to Ithaca. And I got to Ithaca, and Tony discovered that there was another English man in the department and was very disappointed because he was going to have this sort of fame.
I was going to be different.
Have all the cachet of...
And
all the cachet. That's the good English word.
Yes.
there isn't a French word for that.
There isn't
Also, they
there isn't
recently
a French
released
word
a
for
live
entrepreneur.
CD. It's a 3 CD set, right, of one concert, and you can kind of see why. So you guys met in the graduate department.
Yes.
And so, like, how did you kind of connect on...
Tony Tony was experienced in American because he'd spent an exchange year as a student at Swarthmore and had a little folk Peter, Paul and Mary imitating group. Well, they were like Peter, Paul and Mary in some ways. I won't say they imitated Peter, Paul and Mary.
Well, which
but
one was Tony?
Tony was that one.
No, which one was, what was Tony? Peter, Paul, or Mary?
Actually, he was probably Peter.
Oh, really?
I can tell you that I actually have a photograph here. I have a photograph of this,
Yes,
of this trio. This will kind of capture it for you. So here's a picture of the trio. Tony's playing guitar over here. And
Did you play guitar?
two
You played
guitars and
mandolin.
banjo. But here's the better version
Guitar.
of that band. Tony up in a tree playing guitar.
That's where they wanted me.
All right, so anyway, moving along here now.
So moving along, so we arrived, and I also sang folk songs,
What kind of things were you singing at that point?
I was singing. I taught myself to play guitar, listening to people like Joan Baez, and I got into early Dylan, doing American stuff. But also I got into English stuff when I was an undergrad at Manchester University. Right before I left, my guitar had been stolen, so I arrived in the US guitarless and instrumentless. I hadn't picked up all these things yet. So, but what I had done before I left was put everything that I could find, borrowed records from friends and everything, on reel-to-reel recordings.
And a good thing, too.
So I had a bunch of reel-to-reel recordings. It included that Copper Family's LP,
Right.
which
And you were already singing some Copper Family songs, or you were still yet to learn?
I was singing some English songs. I was singing some English songs. I wasn't specifically singing Copper Family songs.
And what other material would have been on those recordings?
Was Spencer the Road? What other material?
Other than the
Watersons, people that were around at the time. American folk music too.
Yeah, but some of the important kind of English.
Yeah, some of the important
trad singing.
Yeah, Luke Hillen, people like that. And so Tony was still singing occasionally with his trio. I wound up sharing an apartment with him and a couple of other people. They found an apartment and then said they had an extra room and would I like it, since I hadn't found an apartment. So I said, okay. So we wound up staying in the same place. And then another friend of ours in the department who was Irish had a wife who taught at a special school for boys sort of in care. And the George Junior Republic, it was called.
He means juvenile delinquents.
Yeah, juvenile. And so John Kennedy said, you both sing folk songs, why don't you come and do a program for, I can't remember her name, what was his wife's name?
Don't know.
For her school. And so
She asked you to do this based on
us both singing folk songs, come and entertain the boys. And
So you started singing around that?
Tony was still singing with his trio occasionally, but they were widely scattered, so it was occasional. I had given them a couple of songs. I remember that I taught them the Barley Mow, as in, here's good luck to the... And they were doing a concert at Cornell, I think that spring, which would have been the spring of 1969. And they invited me up on stage to sing that with them. I wasn't expecting it. I was very nervous and shaky. But they were a very professional trio.
So you said it was kind of a Peter, Paul, and Mary sort of trio, but what were some of the things that you were singing with them?
Anti-war songs.
Mm-hmm.
I got a letter from LBJ.
I got a letter from LBJ. She said it is your lucky day.
Time to put your
Khaki trousers on.
Tom Paxton.
So,
Anyway.
So this reform school.
So we put some songs together. This was the first time we actually did a quote concert together, and it included everything from some English folk songs to Woody Guthrie, all sorts of stuff. And then we said that was fun, and we had friends in the folk music community. We went to Eastern Psychological Association conference in Philadelphia that spring. And Trent Sorensen.
Point out that we were studying
psychology. Yeah. Trent Sorensen was a graduate student colleague of ours, and he knew a bunch of people in the Philadelphia folk music community, so he took us to a party and we met people there. And heard about the Fox Hollow Folk Festival. So that summer.
Where was that?
That's in Petersburg. It was in Petersburg, New York, which is just over the Vermont line in New York State, about 30 miles east of Albany. And so we went there as tourists, but by then we'd got a little repertoire of sea songs and sea shanties and things like that. And we sang informally with other people. We met a whole bunch of people that are still our friends, that we still see that weekend. And on the strength of our informal singing, we got hired to play for Maggie.
In New Bedford.
In New Bedford.
But already at that point, you'd already sort of made this transition from having this repertoire of mixed anti-war songs, and you'd kind of made this move to kind of be more focused on...
We'd kind of made the move. We were singing mostly copper songs and that style of songs and sea shanties by then, yeah.
Was Spencer one of the
we
first
decided
songs?
Spencer's was one of the first songs we did.
Yeah.
We decided we were going to be English.
Yeah. It seemed like a reasonable idea.
Seemed like there weren't that many English. There were a lot of people singing Bob Dylan songs.
What were a few more then of those early trad songs you did? You mentioned "Creeping Jane" in a previous workshop as an early song.
Well, while we were at Cornell until 1972. We were there from 68 to 72. While we were there, Well, we played the coffee. We had a pub scene. There was a place called Johnny's Big Red Bar and Grill that it's not there anymore, sadly, but we used to hang out there, and we had a bunch of friends that sang with us, and we'd sing informally because they didn't have a jukebox. And so we sang there. So we sort of developed our repertoire of pub songs, singing there.
That was you'd hang up.
We're hanging out with our friends, yeah.
Uh-huh. So there was like a scene.
There was a bit of a scene
of people who were kind of into traditional songs.
We had one friend, Mark Phillips. He died of cancer, sadly, who owned a car, and when we did our first gig, which was in New Bedford in September in '69, he drove us there. We made the princely sum of $25, spent it on lobster and stuff seafood you'd find in New Bedford that we didn't find in Ithaca, put it in a cooler and brought it home. And
We did that?
yes, we did that.
So what do you remember about that gig? How did it go?
It was good. It was a success. They liked us. We were very personable young men. And we were lively and energetic. We wore striped clothes and silly hats. All silly hats.
Yes, I have photographs to prove. You had quite a hat collection.
We did.
And when we got booked at a couple of little places, that following spring we got booked at the New York Folk Song Society booked us for their spring weekend, which was where we met the Beers family who ran the Fox Hollow Folk Festival, and they hired us. Well, they hired everybody, but they found out about us and hired us for the Folk Festival. We went back that year, which would have been 70. I think we played that for the first time.
So just in terms of like the kinds of things that you were singing like through this like early period of getting going, you were still mining those reel-to-reel tapes.
Yeah, still mining those reel-to-reel and finding more stuff. By then, I was starting to learn to play banjo. I'd met Sarah Gray, who's a banjo player. She lives in Maine now. She lived in Scotland for many years. And she gave me a quick lesson on the banjo, which I heard her play banjo, and I said, I've got to learn to play banjo like that.
Yeah.
So she gave me a half-hour lesson, and I spent the summer driving my roommate nuts, learning to frail the banjo the whole summer.
Yeah.
Well, I was struck because I kind of went back over a lot of your albums, and that first recording, Spencer the Rover, which was from 1971. So that was just within 2 years of you having started.
Well, and that was produced by Phil Shapiro, who had his radio show, his weekly radio show, Bound for Glory, which is still running.
Yes, I played it.
Yeah.
But on that recording, almost everything is unaccompanied, except
guitar.
There are 3 tracks where you play a very delicate, beautiful, folky Joan Baez kind of guitar.
Well, yeah.
But everything else is just unaccompanied.
Unaccompanied, because I hadn't developed the banjo yet, and I hadn't got a concertina yet.
Yeah. And so for the first couple of years, that's what
we did.
What your concerts were mostly unaccompanied.
Mostly unaccompanied, and a bit of guitar.
Yeah. So and then the next recording, the next one was
the Western Ocean.
Across the Western Ocean, which was you had several guests on that.
Well, one of the things that happened over the years was that Tony would develop interests. Tony was the project director. I mean, and one was an interest in sea songs. Our friend Lou Killen was singing sea songs, and he'd made a really nice album. He was on the original Clearwater crew, which sailed Pete Seeger's boat down from Damariscotta, Maine, where it was built, and sailed it down to New York and then up the Hudson, doing concerts along the way. Few years later, they had a second crew going up the Hudson, and we were part of that. But Lou was singing folk songs. Gordon Bach was the first mate of the Clearwater. A couple of singers from Washington, D.C., John Aberhart and Andy Wallace, were there, and Andy is still around. John Eberhardt sadly died of MS. And they recorded an album, Lou did an album called 50 South by 50 South of sea shanties. He played concertina, but it's mostly unaccompanied, and Andy and John sang chorus. It's still one of the best sea shanty recordings there is.
Until there was Across the Western Ocean.
He says modestly.
And that was the sort of shanties for the Cape Horn trade, really. And Tony's idea was to sing shanties and sea songs for the
Package.
for the packets, the transatlantic packets.
Right.
And so we put together this program. We had friends who did it with us. Jeff Warner was involved, his brother Garrett, David Jones, and pretty much the five of us.
There's a woman.
And Jeff's ex-wife did some of the narration.
Right.
And it was narratives and songs of the transatlantic trade. And we performed it in Prospect Park in Brooklyn. I've got a tape of that somewhere.
Was it really in Prospect Park?
Yes, it was really in Prospect Park.
So were some of those songs ones that you'd learned from New Killen, or?
Well, no, I think we pretty much researched our own songs.
I did
by then.
several trips down to New York City to
South
the
Street.
South Street Seaport Library
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
when the ships came in.
In fact, we originally were going to have the library put out the recording. They put out Lou's recording, and we were going to make the tape and give it to them. But they decided they didn't want it. So we put it out on Phil Shapiro's Swallowtail label.
And so you did play regularly for Phil in.
We did that as regularly as we could.
Yeah, we played.
And for a while, we prided ourselves on not repeating a song.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were
It was a great spur for learning their repertoire.
Yeah.
right. Yeah. So in that respect, you weren't just looking for sea shanties. You were looking for all kinds of things.
All kinds of things, yeah. I mean, the Sea Shanties was this special album. But we learned songs from every aspect of English folk, what I'll call English folk culture. The traditional ballads, the big ballads, industrial songs, agricultural songs. Tony had a family history of monologues, so they became part of the show.
And again, like in terms of your sources, so like for the sea songs, you know that was a project. You went to that library. There was an archive there.
Yeah.
Then more generally, learning all these songs. Where did you?
Well, I mean, I have, and we've had books. I mean, we learned a lot of them out of books. We learned a lot of them from other people's recordings. We heard other people's recordings, which sent us to the books. Things like that.
Yeah.
We both have extensive libraries of folk music material.
Right. So like in learning, learning like a lot of songs in a short period of time, did you kind of develop any thoughts about like how just the actual act of like learning songs and?
It was easier back then.
So staying young, would that be your
Staying young,
recommendation?
yes.
And we both, I did, so I assume John did too. We kept songbooks
Yeah.
that we wrote the words out in.
Yeah.
And for me, that was a essential way of remembering the words.
Just the
I mean,
act-
I had this from England. I was singing in my local folk club in the early 1960s, you know. So I had these 5 little notebooks all full of words.
Yeah.
Many of them I wouldn't sing now, and many of them I wouldn't have sung with Tony. But you know, it included Dylan lyrics and all that sort of
Yeah.
thing. Where have you been, my blue-eyed son?
But just like in a very technical way, like when you learn a song, how do you do it? Like what's your actual act, your technique for? Like I know, like Tony, I remember you like talking about like you would be very visual with images. You talked about that, like you'd actually kind of picture some of the.
learn the words, learn the tune, learn the song, and then decide if you wanted an accompaniment and put that to it.
Well, so that's an interesting thing from you. So you would never try to work up a song with an instrument. You would have the song stand on its own first, and then.
I won't say never, but the idea for me of folk songs is always to give the song the premiere. You know, the song asks for whatever accompaniment goes best with. This is why I play so many different instruments, because some songs I like to play on a banjo. Some songs I liked to play on a guitar. I don't play guitar much anymore. Some songs really don't want instruments at all.
Right.
And so we always sung and accompanied. We both went on a trip to England one Christmas when we were undergraduates and wound up at Harry Crabb's shop in London.
And both bought
And we each
concertinas.
bought a concertina, an English concertina. I actually do have an English concertina. When Tony got interested in Morris dancing, he needed a musician, so I got interested in playing Morris dance music. And for that, we decided that the Anglo concertina, the bouncy diatonic concertina, worked better, so I managed to find an Anglo concertina. I bought it from Michael Cooney, who'd got it from Peggy Seeger, because she played English concertina and had tried Anglo and didn't get on with it.
Right.
So I started playing the Anglo concertina. Then I played button accordion for a while.
Yeah.
Then I decided the Anglo concertina, which I was using mostly for dance tunes, and the English concertina for song accompaniments, I decided the Anglo works pretty well for songs too, and it can give a little bit of bounce. So I started using the Anglo concertina more and more.
Uh-huh.
And
One of the striking things, like going back through some of the recordings and certainly like looking at the photographs, though, is also how many instruments you played.
yeah.
I mean, there's a photograph there of you holding a fiddle. Maybe you were just holding it for somebody. I don't know. You played fiddle at one
I
point?
did play fiddle a little bit.
And
Yeah.
mandolin several times, like I know on
Yeah.
that concert from '78, that recording, there's you playing some mandolin and.
There's an absurdity.
Tony was an okay mandolin player. You played mandolin with the trio.
Yeah, I did.
And we used to do Bide Lady Bide.
Which
The
we never
lady
sing
sits,
anymore.
which we don't. But when we did it later, I played English concertina for it. When we did it earlier, we played mandolin and guitar for it. So, when I say the song demands an accompaniment, some songs
Yes,
can
sure.
be done in different ways.
Yeah.
Tony used to had a lovely two-finger style of playing the banjo, which he did. Remember Hull and Halifax and Hell? From Hull and Halifax and Hell, good Lord deliver me.
Dalesman's Litany.
A song called the Dalesman Litany. Tony would play the banjo, and I played the concertina.
You played Bowed Sultry.
Yeah.
There's actually a lovely arrangement
I still do.
on
Well, I don't anymore. My hands are no good.
more Staines.
Staines Morris.
Staines Morris.
It was recorded Staines Morris.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It was lovely. Yeah. So you had kind of a run of a bunch of albums, kind of every other year. Spencer the Rover, then
Yeah.
a couple of years later, Across the Western Ocean, and then
I think Present from the Gentleman.
no, that was
Mellow.
Mellow with Ale from the Horn, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, by then we were working with Bill and Andy Spence
Yeah.
over in Albany. Bill Spence, they'd started Front Hall Records.
Mhm.
Bill Spence, I'm wearing his T-shirt. Sadly died last year. He was a hammer dulcimer player, mostly played dance music on the hammer dulcimer, and a recording engineer. He recorded the music that was used as the theme tune for Crockett's Victory Garden. If you remember Crockett's Victory Garden, that was him playing the hammer dulcimer, and he got a lot of a press out of that and sold a whole bunch of Hammer Dulcimer records. But they'd started a record company, and we recorded with them.
And that was at his house?
At his house, yeah.
Like, you just recorded in his front room?
We recorded in the living room. He put up baffles and stuff. And yeah.
The shop was called Andy's Front Hall, but the recording was in Andy's front room.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's confusing.
And we did that there. We did the early Noel Sing We Clear albums there.
Yeah. When you so just like thinking about those that early chunk of years, like
Yeah.
those first 5-6 years, and you've kind of like pulled together this repertoire and started to focus, and you've kind of like played with some different instrumental accompaniments, and you're kind of working out your singing style. Like when you think about or listen to those albums now, what does that seem? Does it seem like there's much of an evolution there, or does it seem very removed from where you went later, or do you feel like you just kind of found this thing early on? And
Well, I'm aware that my English accent got a lot less in the singing, and so that's.
was that just a natural thing?
I think so, just of living here.
Yeah.
And, when I go back home, people just hear a Yankee
Right.
talking to them.
When you go into the pub and ask for a draft beer, they don't know what you're talking about. I say the pub, into a bar. I can't say bar. There's an R in it. We don't have R's in the part of England that I come from.
I have to say, there's a couple of great songs that you do where you really studied American dialect to great effect. The Rolling Mills of New Jersey.
Well, yes.
Really.
Well,
If I didn't know, I would have thought that you guys were just native New Jersey people.
no, you wouldn't. Well, there was, see, what there was at the Fox Hollow Festival and some of those things, there was a late night singing session.
Oh, God.
And they loved these slow, lugubrious, really nice
The
songs.
rolling hills on the border.
And we were young and active, and we didn't, I mean, they were too, because we were all young back then. But there was, there was this session of really nice, slow songs.
Lugubrious.
And they're wonderful. And I love them, but
We
they're
didn't want to sing them.
But we made fun of them. In retrospect, we shouldn't have. But we
Yeah,
did.
we did.
But
It was funny.
But we did. And so the Rolling Mills of New Jersey came out of a party
In New Bedford.
in New Bedford, and we were driving after this party. We were driving to Boston, and we sort of started singing, and
When I die, bury me low.
we actually remembered the verses the next day and wrote them down, didn't we? So
Where
that's
I
where that-
can hear the petroleum flow. A sweeter sound I never did know. The rolling mills of New Jersey.
Yeah. Well, I can kind of see what your family in England were thinking.
Yeah.
You guys, like you always had like a really, like your performances, I feel like, you always had, there was like a lot of humor in them. Very, very, it was a very sort of spontaneous kind of humor, and yet things were also like very well crafted. Like you would have a very wide range of, some very beautiful things. I mean, the whole range of things. I think you once said that you didn't tend to plan your concert sets.
We didn't at all.
Yeah, we tended not to.
I can remember a few times doing festivals.
If you're doing a 20-minute festival
Yeah.
set, you need to plan.
Yes.
And but we would sort of start. We would pick a couple of songs that we were going to start with, and a couple of songs that we were likely to end with, unless we went in a different direction. And then we'd start with the first couple of songs, and we'd say, then we'll maybe do some Kipling, or then we'll maybe do some industrial songs, or then, you know, and went from there.
And so, you know, I mean, I think for like a lot of performers, that would seem like kind of a daunting thing. You're sort of a lot of performers are used to kind of having a set in mind and practiced.
Yeah.
But
Well, I've known people who've rehearsed their song introductions in front of a mirror, you know.
And you're saying you never did that?
No.
No.
And did that ever end up in ever take you down unexpected
No,
roads?
because if one of us stopped, the other one would pick it up.
Yeah. Usually if Tony couldn't think of a song, then it was up to me.
Oh, yeah, what do you want to do?
I don't know.
I have to say, I actually remember like some of your awkward moments, and sometimes even in the middle of a song, like if you would, you know, come to if you'd lost the words, it was often like a highlight of the concert because you guys were just so good at kind of dealing with those moments, and there was a way in which like it kind of created this atmosphere that there was really no pretense to what you were doing.
Well, folk song is song of the folk, song of the people, and by definition, by any standard, they are informal. You can have set arrangements and you can do them very nicely, and that's what we like to put on recordings.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, our arrangements have always been very fluid.
In what way?
In maybe we don't want to do a long instrumental verse in the middle of a song. Maybe because of the way the concert's going, we need to get to the end of this song and do something else. Things like that. Or, you know, I'll start playing a tune on the concertina and Tony will come in whenever. It's like one of those. We were flexible.
Yeah. Just switching gears a little bit, like just in terms of like your singing style, because I think like a thing that's very like strong, like for both of you separately and together, it was just like, and you talked about this earlier, talked about kind of like really focusing on the song itself. You know, you're always very strong at communicating the words, like.
Well, the words are it, aren't they?
That's it.
If an audience can't hear the words, there's not much point in singing these songs because they're all about words,
Stories.
stories.
But and I mean, and there's different ways of doing that. But there was a certain kind of dramatic. There were certain sort of dramatic things that you would do. I mean, you could be physically dramatic, both of you. I think, like in terms of your delivery of the words.
You're putting the story across.
Mm-hmm. What about your harmony singing, John?
Well, I mean, I made it up. I knew elements of harmony from high school music. I mean, I knew what a triad was and what fifths was, and and what a bass line was, and what a chord was. So I tried to make a harmony that went with the melody. Tony our thing was Tony sang the melody and I would do a low harmony for it. Tony always sang loud, and I had to learn to sing loud to keep up with it. I mean, I credit Tony with whatever singing that I can do now, where I can generate the volume.
Yeah.
Because I had to. It's like, and in an English folks club back in those days, you didn't have a sound system, and a lot of the places we sing now, house concerts and things like that, you don't have a sound system. If you've got a bunch of people in a room and you're playing instruments, you've got to project.
Right.
And
But in terms of your harmony style, I mean, I would say like you were just sort of making it up, and maybe it was just what
I
you
was
came
making
to.
it up, and
But it's a kind of a unique style of harmony singing.
yeah, because I was making it up. You can do harmony in thirds, or you can do harmony in fourths or fifths. And it was Gaynor Jones. You remember
Well, I was
Gaynor
about
Jones?
to say we need to talk about Gaynor.
She was a music graduate student at Cornell. She's in Toronto now. I spoke to her about a year ago, and she said, you know, you break all the rules of harmony singing, but it works. And I said, okay, well, I just try and do things that sound right. The intervals between the two voices, and I get from one chord to another, kind of, that way.
Yeah, I mean, without kind of having done a thorough study, but like I'd say, like, you know, your harmony, it can be a little bit more contrapuntal sometimes.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, harmony can be in thirds or fourths or whatever, and of course you use that, but there's also this kind of contrapuntal thing that you do, but it's also kind of
There are some parallels, and then there's some things that go in opposite.
And you're not
direction.
afraid of unison?
Not afraid of unison. Give an example. Painful plough.
Come all you jovial ploughboy of courage stout and bold, that labour all the winter in stormy winds and cold, to clothe the wheels with plenty, your farmyards to renew, to crown them with contentment. Behold the painful plough.
Which has a bit of you know,
A bit of everything.
My musical partner, Lisa, said, that doesn't sound like you. That harmony line doesn't sound... Who made that harmony line? And I said, well, no, it's what seemed right at the time.
So you mentioned this woman. I wanted to kind of like ask you like about other individuals who were kind of important influences or models, or who were people that kind of helped direct you in your style. Or...
Well, Louis?
Yeah,
Killen?
Lou Killen.
Lou
We
Killen.
have Sally in the room, by the way.
Oh, we do?
The former Mrs. Killen.
Hey.
Or should I say a former Mrs. Killen?
Yeah. One of the few.
How did you?
Not a handful.
What did you learn? What did you learn from Louis?
Storytelling.
Yeah.
I mean,
Storytelling in song or
in song. No, in song.
Mm-hmm.
Really, after really hearing Louis doing that, seemed to me to be everything. That the words have to be hearable, and people need to hear the words, whatever else is going on. And that was the case with trying to sing harmony together. It's that the harmony shouldn't get in the way of telling the story.
Right.
And English people who sang the traditional songs, the English folklorist A.L. Lloyd,
Right.
was very important, I think. Ewan MacColl.
Just describe, but say who Bert Lloyd was and what his influence.
Well,
for
Bert
you
Lloyd was a folk song collector. He was a communist. He was instrumental in putting a lot of industrial songs together. He wrote books. He'd been a BBC commentator. He was a very stylized singer. How would you? Hard to listen to until you got familiar with the genre. He did a number of thematic records. He worked for the Workers' Music Association in London, which had a record company that became Topic Records, which was the leading traditional song label in England. and he was their music director and music advisor. So if I mean, I had this group of friends when I was in Manchester University before I came over here, who they formed a little group called the Valley Folk. 2 guys, 2 girls sang in 4-part harmony. And when they got to make a record for Topic, Bert Lloyd said, well, what I want is a record of folk carols, and you guys can do it. Here's the material. Not everybody was treated this way, but they were. Here's the material that I want you to record for this album, if you want to do an album on Topic. So he was really the music director for Topic Records.
Was that concept of thematic songs?
That was critical for me.
Yeah.
I think the most biggest influence for me in general were the radio ballads that Ewan McCall had done, and of closely following a theme and telling a larger story, I suppose, in themes. And
So describe some of those. So the radio ballads were.
it started with this newspaper story about a train driver who had called John Axon, A-X-O-N, and he had hung on to driving a train after it lost its brakes going down a hill into a station, and his trip ended when he ran into the back of a train that was parked in the station, and he got his fireman to jump off when they were climbing the top of the hill. And so here was a classic. Here was an English train driver story that was clearly epic, and did that. And then Ewan McCall and Peggy Seeger singing with Luke Hillen and a few other people. They did one on singing the fishing, which was on the North Sea fishing trips. And then one on the coal miners, the Big Hewer, and then the last one they did at that point, because there are now new ones that you can find online, was one of the gypsies called the Travelling People, which was, I listened to all of these at some point in the 60s and very early 70s, and they were mind-blowing to me, and it seemed like the only way to go about telling such a large, all-encompassing story was...
Basically, what they did, there was Charles Parker, who was a BBC engineer, Ewan McCall and Peggy Seeger. They get a concept for a story, for the program. They would find all the relevant people, they would interview them, and then McCall wrote songs based on their actual words. And in the radio program, they would mix narrative with actual commentary of the people talking with the songs and the music.
Yeah.
So they were very powerful, very powerful.
There's a couple more things.
Shoals of Herring was the song
came out of that.
Came out of Singing the Fishing was the song from that.
So one of the big thematic projects for you, obviously, Noel Seemly Clear.
Yeah.
That became a huge thing, and I was reading this article from Sing Out magazine where you were kind of telling that story. Partly came out of having seen a similar show in England.
Wasn't really a show. It was, we were at the English Folk Dance and Song Society. Were both of us there?
I'm not sure that we were both there that time.
No.
We were there at one point.
Yeah. Well, I was there and was really taken by a man who became a good friend,
Pat Shaw.
Patrick Shouldham Shaw, and he had put together a program with 2 versions of the Christmas story, one being the classical sort of New Testament type story, what everybody thinks of as the Christmas story, and then a second half of the program that was folk carols based upon wassailing and all of the things that go on, people visiting from door to door.
Sounds like a winning formula.
It sounded like a winning formula. And we came back and I learned that the carols were all dance music. So we got 2 dance musician friends to join with us.
Originally Fred Brunig and Steve
Woodruff.
Woodruff.
Yeah, and then after 10 years, Steve moved to go live in California. So we replaced him. Sorry about if you ever see this, Steve, but with a vast improvement of a man called Andy Davis.
Well, luckily,
Who made the show what it is?
Who made the show what it is, yeah.
Thank you. I was getting tired of being in the audience anyway.
Yeah.
And then you had those guys.
He did the work actually because
Because he's a musician.
We'd get a song and we'd sort of sit
We'd
there
just
and
sing it.
Andy would say, "Oh, I'll do an arrangement of this." Okay, Andy.
So Andy did a lot of the vocal arranging.
Some of the four parts.
Some of it,
I
yeah.
wanted to mention the shameless commerce department here, that the Noel book has probably the largest collection of John and Tony vocal duets notated.
Why don't you say this, John, just so you can be heard on the mics?
Andy said that
Well, you were talking about your two-part style.
the 2-part style, yeah, there are a lot of the 2-part pieces of the Christmas carols that we did that are notated in the Noel Sing We Clear song and carol book.
We're sort of in the home stretch. I want to sort of pull out this article, this Sing Out article that I mentioned earlier, and I'll just read. This is a quote from Tony. So it says, "We go to folk festivals now," Tony relates, "and will often be the only people there who can sing ballads or sing any traditional music. We're waiting for the pendulum to swing around again. There's gonna be people looking for folks who know the songs, and we know the songs." So, has the pendulum swung?
Yeah.
Sort of.
Sort of.
I mean, another thing that you talk about there that seems to be kind of a big thing on your minds is audience participation, chorus singing, which was obviously a big...
Everything that we got from singing in English pubs.
Yeah, and the American pub sing, has taken off from that.
So my question then is from then to now, any sense of movement, of a change?
Oh, a lot.
There is. I mean, there are people singing the ballads. There are
Young people
singing
Yes,
the ballads. They don't always treat them the way I would want them to. But it's theirs now. There's this outfit called Youth Traditional Song.
Yeah.
That they have. I think it's about 4 years. They've had a gathering.
What is it about? I mean, are there some generalizations when you say they don't always treat the songs the way that I would?
A lot of them want to take some of the bad things out of them. They want to rewrite them.
So more,
which is okay.
More that on the level of editing rather than on how they
style.
approach them.
Yeah. No, a lot of them have good style. Good singers with good style.
Yeah.
And a lot of them sing them the way they should be sung. I don't want to make a generalization.
And I mean, I would say that while it's not indicative of kind of the state of America by any means, traditional singing, as we have here in Brattleboro and elsewhere, there's a lot of people, given the opportunity for pub sings, people are very, they're thirsty for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, again, locally, I think a lot of the songs that come up, they're songs that people a lot of songs that you guys sang that are kind of have helped fuel that.
I think that's true.
I think so. It's nice to hear other people doing our songs. We've always said, you know, these aren't our songs. These are the people's songs. They're folk songs, and our job is to keep them going so that other people can learn them and keep them going again, because the songs are great and they're worth that.
Like you said, we actually know the song.
Yeah. Well, we might forget them a bit these days.
Well, you know, you did a great job. Like the repertoire that you built is amazing, and you know, I mean, also because of how you actually performed them, I think was inspiring for a lot of people. And
Well, thank you.
you've done your job. So we're going to wrap up there. How about a hand for John Wallace?